Do you find that when the money comes in from your jobs, you have no idea where it goes next or how to make it grow on its own? Today, we're going to speak with Profit First professional Christian Brim of the Core Group to get to the bottom of this issue once and for all. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Creativity Made Easy podcast. I'm your host, Dustin Pead, creative coach and consultant, helping you with your processes. I help creatives know themselves, their process, and their teams so that they can create greater things together. I'm very excited about today's episode 99, so close to 100. It is the beginning of March, and today we're going to focus on some sustainability with your finances. But before we get into that, I want to remind you that you can follow me on Instagram at Dustin Pead, P-E-A-D. You can find me online at dustinpead.com. While you're there, click on the tools page, dustinpead.com/tools. There will be many things for you there to peruse and download or link to Amazon and purchase on your own, including the book that we're going to get into today. But before we get too much further, allow me to bring in my guest, Christian Brim. All right, welcome Christian Brim to the Creativity Made Easy podcast. Christian, so glad to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me, Dustin. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, today we're going to dive into this idea of profit first planning, and I want to understand or allow our listeners to understand a little bit more about what profit first is. But I tell you what, you tell me, should we talk about the core group first, or should we talk about what profit first is?
Core group's
first?
boring. We don't want to talk about that. We'll talk about profit first.
So then, what is the profit first method? What does that mean?
Sure. So Profit First was a method and a book published by Mike Michalowicz 11 years ago now, based upon his experience as an entrepreneur and how he'd gone through like 3 different iterations of businesses and ended up broke. And he was like, every entrepreneur, there's got to be a solution to this problem. I can't be the only one. And so he developed this methodology he named Profit First, which is, a tool, and it's a fairly simple tool to implement. But I think the linchpin to Profit First is the intention, the mindset behind it. And as a matter of fact, I start out in my book discussing that mindset first, because the tool is just a tool, right? And it will work or not work based upon what you are trying to do with it. Until you believe that your business should be profitable and that it can be profitable, and you're committed to changing your behaviors to make it that way, the tool won't work. So, yes, you're shaking your head.
I love that.
Preach it.
Yeah, no, you're definitely preaching here, but I love it because I'm reading a book right now that's speaking to the very same thing, that we have to have the right mindset before we can venture into anything with success. Shameless plug. I'm not being paid for at all, but Mind Your Mindset by Michael Hyatt is speaking to that
one,
and speaking to me right now on this. I'm probably going to add it to my website as well as a recommended resource. Recommend it to you as well. But what you're saying is so true. Yeah, what you're saying is so true, that we cannot pursue the thing with any level of success unless we can have the right mindset that the success can actually come, right?
Correct. And I think a lot of creatives struggle with that for a couple of reasons. I think, one, creative work is generally not emphasized, prioritized, celebrated as much as the analytical. If you look around education, what do they emphasize? STEM. Everything's got to be, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, right? What are the first courses they cut? Music, art. The whole idea of divergent thinking is not celebrated. Like everything around the education system is, fill in the appropriate box. It's convergent thinking, right? Mm. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs with creative skill sets come to the table kind of thinking that what they do is not real work, right? Mm. And I think the other thing is it's real hard to grasp value around it, right? If you're doing something that is very technical, for instance, engineering or accounting, it leads itself to, in some ways, a more quantifiable value. But creativity is really hard to measure, right? And what the value is. So in my book, I use the example of the iPhone. Well, when Steve Jobs created the iPhone, nothing like that ever existed, right? That was the ultimate in creativity, the idea of having this computer in your pocket, right? That also functioned as a phone, but it was really a computer in your pocket, right? And he was rewarded generously for that. Like the value of that was in the billions and tens of billions of dollars, right?
Right.
And so, when you're sitting there trying to come up with something novel, and you're like, well, what is this worth? I don't know what it's worth, right? And so those are the things that I think that hamper creatives in having that profit mindset in the first place.
Yeah, I love that. Let's get a little practical here. I think at the end of the day, creatives they're a lot like the male species where they're just like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. You know what I mean? So I know I've had that conversation with the core group, even as recent as earlier this week. I had a financial thing come up and I emailed my rep over there at the core group and I'm like, just tell me what to do. I have no idea what I'm doing here.
True.
So let's get practical. What does revenue planning look like? So we have the mindset now that, hey, we can profit from this creativity. Our art can bring profit. We can have a sustainable and scalable business around the creativity and the art that I offer the world. What is then, what do we do when money starts coming in? How do we handle that? What do we do?
So the core of the profit first model that Mike developed is 5 bank accounts. And essentially you can think about it as like back maybe your grandparents or your great grandparents used envelopes when the payday came, and they cashed their paycheck and they put their money in different envelopes, and they had a certain amount for groceries and this was for rent and whatever. And when that money was gone, it was gone.
Dave Ramsey. We did all that too.
Yeah. So it's a very similar concept in that you have one bank account that all your money goes into, and that's all it's for, is to deposit. It's kind of like staging your money. A lot of creatives have project work, and it can get uber confusing when they get big chunks of money at different times of over different periods. It's not like a regular basis, and they're trying to keep track of it. And like one client of ours, before he started using Profit First, he had the right idea. He knew, okay, I'm making this much money on this project and this much money on this other project. But trying to put it all into one bank account, he was getting confused as to, okay, well, how much is left over from the last project versus what's in there from the new project. And so you create this one account where you put all your money in, your deposit account, that's your staging area. And then you have 4 other accounts that you allocate money to for specific purposes. Now, you can have as many accounts as you want. We just give you the basics, but some people, when they get going, they'll have 20 different accounts because they want to manage their money at that detail, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
But the first bank account, the deposit account, then you have the second account, which is your profit account, because you're going to set aside a certain portion of those dollars to be profit regardless.
Right.
And I recommend you start at 1%. Like, if you've never done this before, don't try to run the marathon when you haven't ever gotten off the couch. You're gonna hurt yourself.
Yeah, that's good.
So put 1% in there, and then leave it, and don't look at it, and look at it again in 90 days after a quarter, and you'll be surprised how much money is in there. You really will, because you're not expecting it. It's like, oh, where'd that come from, right? So after the profit account is the owner's compensation account, and that's how you pay yourself to run your family household. And there are some nuances to that I won't get into, but I get into it in the book of what amount you put in there. But for today, it's just the amount that you pay yourself. It's not profit. It's your household. The third account is for taxes, because if you make income, you're paying yourself, and you have a profit, you have taxes on that. So we want to set aside the taxes to make sure that those are accounted for, so you don't run into a situation where April 15th rolls around and you owe money and you don't have money to pay for it. And then the last account is what we call operating expenses, or OPEX. And that's basically how you pay your bills, the rest of it. And the purpose of using these buckets is to give you essentially a cash management way of running your business. It doesn't replace an accountant. It doesn't tell you how much money you've made over the year. It doesn't tell you how much you spent on software, all of those things. But what it does is it allows you to say, okay, a great trigger is if I have to move money from one account to the other. So like, I have to move money from my profit account to cover my bills in my OPEX account. That is a red flag. It's a circuit breaker. It's like something's not right. And, we do this in our business. We eat our own cooking. And I have a CFO that handles our internal finances, and he does not have access to the savings account, the profit account. And if he has to move money out of that, it's got to go through me. And it's kind of funny when we started doing this. He said, well, I need to transfer some money out of the profit account. And of course, I'm like, what the hell? Why? And he's like, well, we had extra money in the operating expense account, and I knew we were going to need it in 90 days, but rather than let it sit there and not earn interest, I went ahead and transferred it to the profit account. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. But the point is that was a warning flag to me that something's not working in the finances, and that's the way you should look at it.
Right. And so the profit account and the tax account, just for clarity for our watchers and listeners, those are savings accounts that earn interest, small amount, but still something. Right.
Correct.
If you put a large amount in, that 1% of 1,000 is more than 1% of 100. So you're going to see that grow a little bit over time. Right. And then the other accounts are checking accounts, because money's coming in and going out. Right. It's just a thoroughfare at that point. Got it. So we talked about the operating expense account. This is where I really lean into the coaching on the core group the most right now with the state of my business. Is talk to me about expense management. What should I be spending money on? What should I not be spending money on? How do I then so I've got all my stuff in the right buckets. I've got all my stuff in the right accounts now. Now, how do I do it? How do I use it in the right way so it sets me up for continued success and scalability and doesn't hinder that growth?
Right. So I think the biggest way it does that is that it limits what you've got in the sense that, maybe 70 cents of every dollar or 50% of every dollar you've brought in is put into that operating account. You automatically don't have that other money to spend, right? So you're looking at your operating expense account, and then when you go to spend money, you automatically have a smaller amount, and it forces you to ask the question, do I need this? Right?
That's good.
A lot of
creatives
times,
love to spend money.
No, absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with spending money as long as you have a purpose behind it, right? Like, I spent a lot of my life spending money without really thinking about it. Rather than, let me go back. So a lot of business owners try budgets, right? And like a personal budget, they'll set up a budget for the year, and they'll say, "This is what my." Right. And what happens about month 2 or 3 is the numbers haven't worked out the way you thought they were going to work out. And so you just kind of say, screw it. And it goes out the window. Because a budget was designed for big organizations that are delegating spending authority. So like you're the marketing department, you've got $100,000 to spend this year. That's your budget. That means that's what you get to spend. Well, the problem with a business owner is exactly, it's a control mechanism, right? But the problem with a business owner is you're in control, right? So like if you want to spend 110, you can, and no one's going to stop you. So it goes back to that mindset. Like if you're going to go ahead and spend more than is in the operating account on a consistent basis, you need to check your intent. Like, what are you serious about this? Eventually, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's great. Checking your intent is key.
Right. So the managing your expenses part, you'll figure out in 3 to 6 months, right? You'll go through all your expenses and make sure that you're spending it wisely. And then the question becomes, okay, how can I increase my profit beyond that? Because you can only reduce your spending so much. There are fundamental expenses that you have to be in business, right? So that's where I go into the book on the biggest lever to increase your profit, which is your pricing, because that is where most of the value, the untapped value and the untapped profit in your business is. Yeah. And I go through how to do that, and I can discuss it now if you want or not.
Yeah, I was going to say the third thing I wanted to hit on was growth strategies, and it sounds like we're naturally leaning there anyway, because like you mentioned now and like you mentioned in the book, a lot of that growth strategy comes from pricing. And as I'm working with creatives all the time, they're always having that conversation with me. We're bouncing things off of each other. How does this pricing feel to you? How does this pricing feel to you? But at the end of the day, it comes down to that value proposition that you talk about in the book. So yes go there.
Okay. All right. Well, value pricing is a concept that I didn't develop. I was introduced to it 20 years ago by some Australian lawyers that wrote a book for accountants and lawyers. And he was basically just tearing our industry up about how we bill and how wrong it is. And the most business owners, not just accountants and lawyers, but most business owners look at pricing one of 2 ways. They look at, or maybe 3 ways. So first is they price it based upon what everybody else is doing. So, they look at the marketplace and they say, oh, well, they're charging that, so I'll charge a little less.
Yeah.
The second way is they look at their costs, and they're saying, well, it costs me $100 to do this, so I'll charge $150, and I'll make some profit off of it, right? And then the third one is just inertia. This is the way I've always priced it, so this is what I'm going to price it at. Value pricing flips it on its head and says, rather than looking internally at your costs, it's looking at the value that you deliver the customer or client. And that requires more work, but it unlocks amazing potential. So I start with this premise, and this is something that I think every business owner, not just creatives, having a very clear idea of the problem that you're solving for your customer or client. And good. The longer, and it was, God, I talk about my own journey. The problem is, the longer you're in business, the more you assume you know about your customer or client, right?
Yeah,
right. And so, like last year, we revised our service offerings. We tweaked them a little, and I went back and started listening to client interviews that when they were onboarded, like why they bought from us, what problem were solving. And some of the things that that we added, such as personal financial planning and coaching, were two elements that we added to our service offerings. They were hidden in plain sight. Like they were there, they were talking about them, but I wasn't hearing it. We weren't hearing it.
Yeah.
And so having a very clear idea of the problem that you're solving, and then delivering a solution that solves as much of the problem as you can, allows you to extract the most value. Now, sometimes it's hard to quantify that value, right? And the revelation that I had after 27 years in business was that nobody buys what we do. They don't buy bookkeeping. They don't buy taxes. They don't buy payroll. They don't buy any of that stuff. What they're buying is a feeling.
Right.
And the feeling is financial peace, for lack of a better term, financial clarity, peace of mind, however you want to define that, because what they have is financial anxiety,
right,
and lack of clarity. And so how do you put a number on that? Well, that's kind of hard, right? So then you may have to go back and look at what other people are spending or are charging. We also, took into account what the business was making, like, the average client that we're selling to, like, what is their financial situation, and what would be a number that makes sense to them for that feeling, right?
Yeah.
But it's not a science. And the other way to do it is, if the value is very quantifiable, is to figure that amount out. So I use a term in the book called BATNA, which is a term in negotiation called best alternative to a negotiated agreement. It's basically, what are their other options, right? So if you're a videographer and you're working on a project for a company and you're trying to determine your price, it starts with, well, what is the value of that video to the client? What are they using it for? How will it impact their business? What profit will it generate them to use this? And that gives you a high end. That like gives you the top end. And then you look at, okay, what are their alternatives? Well, they could hire another videographer. Okay. They could bring the videography in-house. They could hire a team to do it themselves. But understanding those numbers gives you clarity on what you can charge. And
Right.
what I find is that the vast majority of people that offer services underprice their work.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Man, that's a lot to unpack. For
I know
sure.
I talked a lot. I got to have some water.
No, you're great. I think it's all stuff that we creatives need to know and to understand and to think through, going back to that mindset so that we can, scale what we're doing. We're doing this because it's a passion project that turned into a business, right?
Right.
So,
Yes.
in closing, Christian, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you're like, if I have a creative professional's ear and we're talking about profit first, or we're talking about money, what is there anything that we haven't mentioned yet that you're like, please hear this today and start practicing it?
Two things. One is it absolutely is true that you can do something you love that fills your soul, that scratches that itch, and make a profit at it. And if you're not making the profit that you want, are you willing to do what you need to do to change it? So it's not complaining about the economy or the competition or your situation. It's
Your starting point.
right? Are you willing to do something different? And if the answer is yes, then I would try implementing profit first and working with core to help you do that.
Yeah.
The second thing is if you want to just try it yourself, is set up that profit account and put 1% in and wait 13 weeks and see what shows up, because what it's going to show you is that it's possible. I mean, there's nothing better to prove a reality than cash in the bank. And it's like, oh, okay, that's possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, that's so good. We're so thankful for what you guys are doing at the Core Group and Profit First for Creatives. Where can they find you guys online before I share your other resources?
Sure. It's coregroup.us.com. And my personal website, where you can get my book and my social handles and all that stuff, is christianbrim.com.
ChristianBrim, BRIM.com. The book is Profit First for Creatives. I've told you this before in private, but I want to say it on here for all the other creatives to hear too, because a lot of people, a lot of creatives specifically I'm not good at reading. To which I think is a lie that you've believed for too long. But what I love about this book is I'm going to turn it sideways. If you're watching on YouTube, look how thin it is. I just appreciate that as someone who struggles to read sometimes. I mean, I've learned to love to read. I do love to read.
It took me a long time to make it that large.
I'm telling you, I am for it. I love it. I think all books should be this size. I released my first book last year. It's about the same size. Let's hear it for the small books, because that's what's making the big that's what's making the big dent. So go get Profit First for Creatives. I'll have a link in the show notes and a link on my website. If you're interested or you need help with any of the things that we talked about today, set up a conversation with Christian's team at the Core Group. I'll have that link in there as well. This is not a paid ad, but this is from a free testimonial that I have read the Profit First book, read Profit First for Creatives, and I'm now a part of the Core Group clientele. And I can tell you from experience, it is a huge relief to have a team of experts on your side, working for you and for your business strategy and coaching you all along the way. So, Christian, thank you for what you and your team are doing over there. It's huge.
Well, thank you for the feedback. I really appreciate it. And if you don't like reading, I do have the Audible version. You can
There you go.
You can listen to my sweet melodious voice and fall asleep.
Listen, if you're only listening to this, just know that Christian has that face for radio, just like me.
Absolutely.
So, I love it. Christian, thank you so much again.
Thank you, Dustin.
Thank you guys for listening. This is episode 99, which means next episode 100, we've got some very special things to announce that are going to come out. I cannot wait to share that with you next time on the Creativity Made Easy podcast. Have a great week.